Thanks. Well, I'm going to introduce you real quick,
Okay.
just so the families out there can get a chance to know a little bit about you and obviously your background and the things that you've accomplished in your life, because it's quite a story of what you've been able to do with your not only your career as a player, but your even your better career as a coach, and
That's for sure.
you're so well respected around the lacrosse community, and it's we're just very grateful for you to be here. So.
Oh, thanks.
So everybody out there, we got Coach T here, Coach Tierney, Bill Tierney. He's been a coach in lacrosse for a very long time. He was a guy that played at Cortland State as a player, won a national championship there. Then he ended up going on to coach college lacrosse at RIT, Johns Hopkins, Princeton for many years, and obviously now University of Denver, where he's the head coach. He's won seven national championships, which is unbelievable. 6 at Princeton, 1 at Denver. He's won a gold medal with the United States men's team in 1998, and he's a 2002 Hall of Fame inductee with U.S. Lacrosse. So, Coach, quite a resume. I don't think there's anybody out there that can compete with that. And no, like I said, we're very grateful to get you on here.
No,
So.
thanks, Jake. I'm excited about it. And as we move forward, if anybody wants to pipe in, if you know how to technologically do that, please feel free.
Awesome. Well, I guess the first question that Mike and I had, because Mike Gabel's on here with me, is just how's everything going at Denver with the whole COVID-19 thing? I mean, what are your thoughts on this whole thing? How's it going to affect NCAA lacrosse? How is it affecting you guys? Just like, what's your whole thought process around it, and how your team is doing? So,
I mean, that answer to that question could take us hours, but I'll try to keep it short. I mean, first and foremost, when it all went down, we were getting ready to play Ohio State and that weekend. And all of a sudden that Wednesday, we started getting some inkling that something was wrong, and then Thursday morning, we found out in our department, like everybody did, that this thing was shut down. And I think everybody thought it would be short term. And now here we are 35 days into it. And so many different things have happened from our student athlete standpoint. We have an interesting academic schedule here. We're a quarter system, which basically is a trimester throughout the year. And so our spring term, hadn't even started yet. So our kids have been on the whole spring term for the last 3 weeks now. This is the end of the 3rd week. On the remote learning, is probably everybody who's watching this, children are. And so we've had to get through that. From what the guys tell us, their professors are having a harder time with it than they are. And I understand that. I meet with my staff every morning on Zoom, and, we go through the things that we would normally go through in the office. Our department meets once a week with the head coaches. We're trying to do, we meet with our team every Monday on Zoom. So that's, a big group. We've been giving them readings to do this week. The last couple of weeks, we've been using the book Mind Gym and going over it, which has real short chapters, real good stuff to think about. And, just trying to keep the conversations going. Last week, we had individual meetings with each one of our players. And so we're just trying to keep it going. And then when you jump to the lacrosse world in general, this whole decision by the NCAA allowing guys to kind of repeat their senior year, and then the Ivy League thing of not letting them back, the issues of how to finance all this stuff, the incoming class of freshmen now, for all intents and purposes, we'll have 2 freshman classes. It's been so intricate and so crazy, but thankfully we have a lot to talk about and a lot to do, because trying to stay in touch with all these guys, trying to stay up on scheduling and things like budget, and then this transfer portal, which now has over 500 lacrosse players on it.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Coach, we've talked to a lot of different coaches, and they've mentioned that every school is kind of handling the situation a little bit differently. Just instead of having you go through your spiel like a personal thing, just curious on what your thoughts are and how this might, like the ripple effect it might just have on lacrosse recruiting and so forth moving forward.
Yeah, well, first of all, as I said, we'll have, 2 freshman classes of next year, but that doesn't mean that all of those kids will eventually go through and take a 5th year. That's going to probably be impossible from a financial standpoint for a lot of families. But starting with the seniors who are just graduating, the NCAA's kind of left it up to each school to be able to fund those student athletes at a level that they were funded this past year, which in some cases was no scholarship money because they were on academic money. In other cases, it was significant scholarship money. Some kids have jobs. A bunch of our seniors already have jobs. Some were already signed into grad school. And then you have this whole new thing of young men that are graduating from their colleges and are looking at this opportunity to have a 5th year. And a lot of them are looking to go to other places. And so we've got to look at what our needs are. I think the biggest effect that's going to happen that coaches have to be really careful of is we have such a great culture in our team. And I know a lot of coaches say that, but we really feel great about our kids. We've had the last 3 semesters, we've had our highest grades. Each semester we've gotten better and better, and we don't want to ruin the culture in our locker room. You see some of these programs, they're just grabbing anybody they can get, and I don't blame the kids for looking into it, but it's really made for an intricate process. And then, what I think was a big surprise with the NCAA, not only did they allow the seniors another year, they've allowed all the players that were playing this year another year, which, as you said, the ripple effect. Next year the juniors, that would be seniors next year, they've got 2 years. The sophomores have 3 years. The freshmen have 4 more years. So this thing's going to go on for a long, long time. And eventually, a lot of coaches are now using the term free agent, which is sad for our sport. I think one of the great things about college athletics, college lacrosse in particular, is that despite the battles that go on in recruiting, which a bunch of your kids have gone through, once they decide on a school, hopefully that works out well for them. And then all of a sudden, 4 years later, to go and put another uniform on to play for 1 year, it's almost like they're hired guns, which they are. And you hope that if you do take a couple of those guys, they don't upset the culture of the team. They help the team, and they have a great experience as well.
Yeah, Coach. I mean, switching gears here a little bit, that was great insight just about what's going on right now. One of the most intriguing things about you, and I kind of followed you through you doing this, is that, you were at Princeton for 20 years almost. You won 6 national championships there. And then all of a sudden you got up and said, hey, I'm moving west. I'm going to Denver. All right. And I'm going to help build a program there. What was your mindset of kind of making that decision and kind of deciding, hey, you know what, like this is a great opportunity to go to a non-traditional lacrosse hotbed and really just try to take it to the top, and which you did in 2015 when you won a national championship?
Yeah, there was a lot involved with it, Jake, but to be honest with you, it was a somewhat selfish decision. I was 22 years at Princeton, and my 2 sons, Trevor and Brendan, played for me there. Both won. Trevor won 2, Brendan won 1 national championship. Our daughters had graduated from college, and we were kind of in a situation where I felt, number one, there was nothing wrong at Princeton, but I felt from a personal standpoint, I might have gotten to a rut a little bit, and I didn't want to be in a rut. Before Princeton, I had never been in a job for more than 3 years. And so that 22 was a lot longer than 3. Felt good. My thing has always been, if I'm going to leave somewhere, I'm going to leave it better than I found it, and leave the cupboard full, which I felt like I did at Princeton. And then when I came out here, our boss out here, Peg Bradley Doppus, she could sell snowballs to Eskimos, and she convinced me that this would be good for me. My son Trevor was out here. He agreed to coach with me, and she also knew what the landscape of lacrosse is, and you guys have been instrumental in helping us all expand the landscape of lacrosse. Yours a little more north, ours a little more west, but still we know this expansion. As you know, maybe some of your people don't know, but University of Denver is one of the only college programs that runs a club program as well with our Denver Elite program. So Peg kind of, tested me into thinking that we could not only make the University of Denver program better, but help grow the game further west. And, we wouldn't take, total, credit for that, but certainly feel like we've done our part in helping that happen.
Absolutely. And if you look at your roster, I mean, you got kids from all over different parts of the country, which is really unique. It's, it's not necessarily the Maryland or the Long Island kids. You got kids from Canada, California, you've had kids from Chicago. Can you tell us because a lot of kids that are listening to this right now are from non-traditional lacrosse hotbeds. Can you tell us, like, hey, give them hope, like, hey, there's a possibility where you could go to play on a great school and you don't need to come from Long Island or Maryland for that matter?
Yeah, in fact, that not only is a possibility, but it's a real reality, especially, we like to think, especially at the University of Denver, but certainly, Marquette, Utah, Air Force, all these places that's expanded to have given young people the opportunity. We went into this mindset of, and you mentioned it, of we used to call it in recruiting our 3 C's: California, Colorado, and Canada. But now, if you look at our roster since the time I've been at Denver, we've had kids from 31 different states and 2 provinces of Canada. And, we are much better off with a kid from Illinois that's the best in his program and really wants to be at Denver. I think that's the key. Then guy on the second midfield at Boys Latin, say, who really wanted to go somewhere else and didn't get recruited or whatever, and said, oh, okay, then I guess I'll go to Denver. Those guys don't work out. So we'd much rather a kid. We're recruiting a young man. We're going to expand this, to 32 or 33 states in the next 2 years. We've got the only 2 Division I lacrosse players from Reno, Nevada. We're going to get a kid out of Oklahoma not this year, but next year. And we want is young people that are passionate for the game. We couldn't care less where they come from, what color they are, what religion they are, who taught them. We just want young people who want to be passionate about the game or want to be coached, because we coach. We don't just roll balls out, as you guys know how to coach. Yeah. And would do anything to be at and stay at and make the University of Denver the best program we possibly can.
Coach, obviously Matt Brown is on your coaching staff. Great guy. He's somebody that Jake and I got a chance to play against. We were playing professional a long time ago. It seems like when you went to Denver and connecting with him, you guys have developed a really good relationship. It seems like you guys, that might be your connection to Canada, utilizing him and allowing him to kind of take over the offense. It seems like you did a really good job of maybe just like adapting and improving yourself. And if you wouldn't mind talking about like your relationship with Coach Brown and kind of giving up the reins, the offense to him.
Yeah, it's a great story. When my son Trevor graduated from Princeton in 2001, we had just won the national championship, and he came out to actually coach at the University of Denver. And he called me up during the fall and he said, could we come out to Princeton and scrimmage you guys? So on whatever, February 2nd, well, if you know anything about college lacrosse, the Ivy League, they don't start practice till February 1st. So I said, but what the heck, let's do it. And so they came out, and my wife Helen fed the whole Denver team at our house. And it was kind of this big kumbaya thing because Trevor was the assistant coach. And we go out there the next day, and we had practiced one day, but we still had a lot of talent. We actually went to the Final Four that year and lost in a championship game. But, I can remember during the scrimmage, they had this guy, and we always kid. I mentioned this in our banquet this fall. people always say, like, who was that great attackman in the early 2000s at Denver? And I always say, you know, I don't know who the really good looking one was, but that little fat kid scored 5 goals against us. And that was Brownie. And I think we won like 9-7 or something. So that's where I first met Matt Brown, through Trevor. And then when this thing came up, this job came up in the summer of 2009, Trevor called me and he said, you know, this job's open. If you take it, I'll come back and coach with you. So we came out here, and Peg, you know, talked me into leaving Princeton after 22 years. And then, so I said to Trev, who else are we going to get, you know? And he said, well, I think you should talk to this guy, Matt Brown. And so he reminded me of who he was, and that he had been coaching at Denver for a while. And most only, I think he was only out 1 year that he didn't either play or coach at Denver. So I wanted somebody who knew the ground, knew what the place was like. And so I called Brownie up, and we talked for a bit, and he had written out a whole roster of all the guys that were left and what their strengths and weaknesses were. And we had a long talk, and I said, well, listen, give me 2 weeks and I'll let you know what I'm going to do. And after that, I hung up the phone and I started to look at this list that he had given me. And I called Trevor up and I said, you like this guy? And he said, I love him. I said, all right. I called Brownie up 2 hours later and said, you're with us. And then once I got to him, obviously Trevor and I were defensive guys. Once I got to him and started talking to Matt about offense, I was totally confused. I had no idea what he was talking about. And so I figured if I didn't know after all these years what he was talking about, he's a lot smarter than me when it comes to offense. And as you guys know, I had just had Dave Metzbauer with me for 20 years. So I had 2 of the best offensive coordinators ever in the game with me for now a total of 33 years. And so we've been blessed with Brownie, what he's doing with our club program, and Trevor does with our club program. And now what Brownie has started with this U.S. box lacrosse thing is just, he's changing the game of lacrosse in our country. And we're really excited. I'm blessed to have him as my associate head coach.
That's awesome. That's awesome. One thing that you mentioned that I thought was really unique a couple seconds ago was you said that you're not afraid to recruit a kid from any state. Okay. And, you know, one of the things that I noticed, like a Duke or a Virginia, usually they're getting the blue chip recruit, top 5 kid in the country. He's going there. And if you don't play right away of one of those guys, you're probably not going to play in the 4 years that you're there. Do you feel that, you know, taking a risk of taking a kid from a different non-traditional lacrosse hotbed, you might have to develop them more, but if you do put that time in with them, you could see more success from them on the field and see it pay off?
Well, interesting you mentioned Duke, because I think Coach Danowski and I both, we go back a long time together. And he's about 3 or 4 years younger than I, but he grew up in East Meadow and I grew up in Levittown on Long Island. If you know that geography, it's about 4 miles apart. And, you know, and we were both teachers. And I think that that's become rare in coaching. And so we both believe in a lot of the same stuff. Now, some of our theories are different. You know, I talk about national championships every day to my kids. He says he never talks about them at all. And look how successful he's been. But I do believe that, you know, for us to be successful, sure, we need to get our blue chip guys. We need to get our Westbergs, our Connor Canizaros, or, you know, you could go down the litany of the guys that we've had, but we're not going to back up our roster with, you know, every class of being 8 or 9, you know, Ty Zander top 100 guys. And so instead of, as I mentioned before, taking the guys that were behind those guys, we want just take young men who want to be developed. I'm not the easiest coach in the country to play for. You know, I still believe in, as John Gordon calls it, love tough. I still call it tough love. And you're gonna have to be willing to understand that. You know, I say to my players all the time, don't go by how I say it, go by what I say and listen through it. And I can promise them I'm going to love them. The one thing I tell the parents before, when a young man wants to commit to us and we want him to be in our program, I always say to the parents, can I have your permission? And they always go ahead, permission for what? And I go, I want to be able to give your son a hug when he deserves it. I want to be able to give your son a kick in the butt when he deserves it. And if I can't have that permission, maybe this is the wrong place to go. And nobody says no, because they know, parents know that it's really important to have discipline, leadership, and development in the person that they're entrusting their son that they spent 17 or 18 years with, in programs like yours, bringing them up through school, teaching what's right from wrong. And we believe that we got to continue that process, not, you're the best player in the country, come and do whatever you want, look however you want to look, don't go to class if you don't want. This academic side of this thing is the most important part of it. And we want to develop good students, but we want to develop great people by the time they're out. And if we can enhance that or help with that with the parents, then we feel good about that.
Now that type of coaching style, that tough love, that's what I kind of grew up with. Okay, with Coach Cannella, Coach Andy Shea, Jason Miller. I mean, they weren't going to let me, do anything at UMass that I wanted to do without their permission. Do you feel like kids are kind of like that and don't like that nowadays? Is it a little bit different? Have you seen that type of coaching kind of transform and be more of like a player's coach? Or it seems like you're sticking to who you are and what you believe in, but are you seeing it be a little bit different out there now just based off the kids?
Yeah, but I'm really not, Jake. It's really interesting. We 20 years ago, if you'd have thought that I was going to I love you in our locker room, you were crazy. And I can tell you, I tell my players I love them almost every day, because it is, a lot of coaches talk about family, right? But they talk about family. They're talking about birthdays and Christmas, right? Everything good. Well, come to our program. Everything will be great. I know growing up in my family, I had 2 brothers and 2 sisters. That last piece of roast beef was a battle, and we were going to fight for it. And so I believe that good comes from all this. We are positive leaders. Our staff is positive every day. I remember when my son Trevor graduated, as I said, he was a senior, and we won the national championship, and we're up at the dais, and the reporters are asking him, questions. He played great in the finals against Syracuse, and one of the reporters said to Trevor, "What's it like to play for your father?" And he looked down the row at me and he said, "Can I tell him the truth?" And I was like, "Oh boy." But we have won the national championship. Who cared? So I said, "Of course." And he said, the way he described it was, he makes every day such a challenge for us at practice that the games are easy. And we all know, even in the practice days and the challenging days and the game days, that he truly loves us. And if that can be the legacy that I accomplish, then walking around and giving everybody a trophy and telling everybody, all the niceties of their lives, we do that, but we also are real as well. And if you read stuff from my ex-players, David Morrow, there was a young doctor, he's not younger anymore, Evan Garfine, that they wrote a few weeks ago, a big article in Inside Lacrosse on whether you're a first-team All-American or a guy who sat on the bench like Evan did. If you can get guys 20 and 30 years later say that they love you, then you've done the right thing. And that's my goal.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So you've coached, you've won 7 national championships, 6 at Princeton, 1 at Denver. Would you say winning those national championships had to do with the type of culture that you had on the team? And were there any teams that really stuck out to you that this team was really, really special?
Yeah, it's interesting, Jake, and what you learn through all this, and we've talked about this in our department meeting yesterday, what you learn in all of this is the only one that matters is the next one. And I've been so blessed. I'd be lying to the whole world if I didn't say that, winning with my 2 sons on the field wasn't the most special one, because what can be you know, I still get choked up with that, right? What could be better than that? But everyone was so different. You know, the 92 one was really the bad news bears. These guys, you know, no one ever would have predicted we were going to beat Carolina in the semifinals, beat Maryland in the quarterfinals, Carolina in the semifinals, Syracuse in the finals. And it was just a group of young men that they were my first recruiting class at Princeton. You know, when I recruited them, we were in the process of going 2-13. And so they just believed in me. They believed that in our place. Obviously, Princeton's a great academic institution. And I told them in the first meeting they were going to win a national championship. Now, did I really believe that? I'm not sure, but they pulled it off. And they pulled it off not because they were the best team, even though we had some great players. I mean, Kevin Lowe, Scott Bacigalupo, those guys were sophomores. Justin Tortolani, Scott Reinhart was, you know, those guys were all, David Morrow was on that team, all part of this thing. But that first one had to be really special. And then you look at, you know, that 94 group where Batch and those guys were seniors. You just knew they were going to win it. They were just such a special group of young men. And then we get Hubbard, Hess, and Massey carry us for 3 years, 96, 97, 98. And, you know, those were all special in that 97 was my only undefeated year ever. And that was really special. And then coming to 2001 with my two sons was something you can never forget. Fast forward then, 14 years later, we do the 92 thing all over again, but there was a lot of talent on that team with, and, you know, led by Wes Berg and you know, and great coaching with Matt Brown and Trevor and those guys. It was just a phenomenal group that came together in the right way. Because when I came to Denver, we had to change the culture, and we did that. And these guys were the fruit of all that. So it was, you know, I've just been so blessed with the kinds of guys that have bought into what we do and pull it off, and yet give them that leeway to be great individually as well.
Hey, Coach, obviously, like you mentioned, I mean, you've had some ton of success over the years. A lot of coaches, like even, I mean, I know like Jake said earlier, you know, we look up to you. A lot of coaches look up to you. Who are some people that you use to inspire you, whether it's through lacrosse or maybe other sports that maybe you use to like be like an influence on the way you continue to coach?
Well, you know, it goes way back. I did one of these webinars a few weeks ago, and you know, it was about coaching in general. And as I look back on my career from the time I was 8 years old and in Little League baseball and midget football and all that stuff, I always had great coaches. I always admired these men, you know, and we were always successful for some reason. And so, you know, my high school coaches, especially my football coach, I didn't play lacrosse in high school. So my football coaches were such good men, Nick Bolitzis and Phil Wolf, that they made me believe that this was a way to go. And then I get to college and I got Chuck Winters and Jack Emmer. So you always, and Jake, you mentioned the guys that you had, you know, those guys are still amazing coaches, you know, and all those guys. So I think knowing that I wanted to coach and knowing the impact those guys have had on my life was something that you know, I just thought that was a good path for me. And you know, so I've learned from all of them. And then moving on into my career, I get to Johns Hopkins after RIT, and you know, and Don Zimmerman hires me. Back then, there was no limit on coaching staffs. So we had 10 coaches on the staff, and I was the only one not from Hopkins. And I always tell the story about, I was still at RIT when I got hired at Hopkins. We had to finish our season out. And Zim asked me to scout Syracuse because Hopkins was playing them in the playoffs, or would play them. And I go to the Dome. I'm so excited. I'm a Division I assistant coach now, Johns Hopkins University. And I get there. They fly me down to help them with the scouting report a week or two later. And there's 10 Hopkins guys sitting there, and they go, "Does Syracuse still play spaghetti?" And I kind of look and I look around the table and I go, I don't know what that means. and so I didn't set off a good first impression with guys who I was going to be coaching with. But there was a gentleman there named Fred Smith. Freddie Smith was the defensive coordinator at the time. He was about 62, 63 years old at the time. And Freddie took me under my wing. We had John DiTomaso, right? We had all these guys that were so good. Steve Mitchell was our pole. Zim and I recruited Dave Petramala right after that, and all those guys. So Freddie Smith taught me more lacrosse than anybody in my history. Fast forward, we go to Princeton, and they hadn't done real well the prior 4 or 5 years. So there was really nobody there to help me with lacrosse. But my best friend there was Bob Bradley, who eventually became the U.S. soccer team's coach. He's a professional soccer coach. We became so tight. I learned so much from him. And then certainly Pete Carell, who was the great basketball coach at Princeton. And I would go to a lot of, Pete befriended me. We would sit together in coaches' staff meetings, and he would always talk to me about lacrosse. And remember one day he would always carry these cards in his pocket, and he drew out a basketball basket, and he said, one time he goes, Billy, he goes, if I could go behind a basket like you guys can in lacrosse, I could crush any zone defense out there, And so I watched his practice, and he had a book written, it's called The Weak Take from the Strong, and John McPhee helped write that, and it was so much of what I was trying to do at Princeton, because we were kind of outmanned at that time until we started rolling into those mid 90s and stuff. So learned a lot from Pete, and then certainly along the way with him. It was phenomenal.
So, Coach, you've coached a lot of legendary players. I mean, you talk about you recruited Dave Petramala to, Trevor, to, Damian Davis, to Strebel, Josh Sims. I mean, I could go on and on with all the different guys that you've coached. These are like phenomenal players that are, some of the best to ever play the game. Could you talk a little bit about what made those guys like just different than just the regular player out there,
Yeah, it's obviously at Princeton you had to find good students, and that was very important. And one of them, Justin Tortolani was my first recruit, and his son Jack is coming to play for us this year at Denver, which is such a cool, world goes around in circles thing. But once we get out, I remember we were playing Hopkins, and we had successfully recruited Scott Batsgalupo, and back then you recruited seniors, but he came to our Hopkins game because he was in Baltimore, and Hopkins beat us 20-8. And I remember at the post-game reception, he just looked at me, he goes, Coach, what am I getting into? And I said, Scott, just trust me, we're getting better, we're having great recruiting classes and stuff. And he did. And so I think first and foremost, he, and then Kevin Lowe, whose dad was a great coach on Long Island at Manhasset High School for all those years, and his brother Darren had gone to Brown. We just hit it off, and those guys started realizing who else we were getting. There was a young man named Scott Reinhardt who was he was like a really good player up at West Jenny for Mike Messier. At that point, I made a decision to always recruit a West Jenny guy, try to get one each year. And so one of the things I decided to do at that point was only recruit kids from winning high school programs, which now it doesn't matter to me anymore. I just want great kids. But back then they needed to know how to win. And I think that, then we move on to the, to the great Hubbard Hess Massey stories, and then, Trevor and Strebel and all those Josh Sims and all those guys. And then, the McBrides and Cocaziellos just before I left. And, the last guy I recruited who I never coached was Thomas Schreiber. And, and that almost kept me home, and but I think that if you look at those guys now, and then you go back to then, they're the same people now that they were then. They were just guys who were a little bit more driven, who believed in a message, who believed in what you were saying, and believed in each other and just needed to coagulate. They just needed a plan, which Metzi gave them offensively, and we hopefully gave them defensively. In those early 90s is when we introduced the sliding defense. So we were kind of ahead of the curve a little bit with that. And then once we started winning, then it became easy. Then it became guys wanted to be at Princeton, and hence the Hubbard Hess Massey group.
Coach, obviously you named a lot of guys. I would assume like a person like Trevor Baptiste kind of fits that mold too. And you talk about, putting a good guy in a good situation. Do you mind talking about the story of him maybe coming to Denver?
Yeah, first of all, Denver, when I got there, there were good players at Denver. Mark Matthews is one of the best players I ever coached. And, Jeremy Noble was coming in, and, these guys were really, really good players. They just, we needed to just make sure everything else was okay in their academic world and stuff. And they bought in just like the guys at Princeton did, in a little different way, because it's a little different style university. But those guys bought in, and they just wanted to, just like you guys, they wanted to win. And we were fortunate in our second year at Denver to go to a Final Four. And I think that quickly brought those other guys along. Certainly, Eric Law and had gone to Salisbury his first year. People thought he was too small here, and then Matt Brown wanted him back, and he wanted to come back. So we brought him back. And then, just all those guys. Connor Cannizzaro was a transfer. We had recruited his brother Sean, and Sean kind of relayed to Connor about our culture. Connor knew some of our guys, and so he came. And then, you have all of this. It just kind of kept rolling like that. Christian Bergdorf, and then Ryan LaPlante, and you had these guys that just kept helping you. And then as you won, and we went to 5 Final Fours in our first 8 years, it just attracted others. But Dylan Sheridan, who you guys know well, he's my son-in-law now. Dylan was with us for 4 years and came back to me one day, and he said, there's this guy we got to have. You're like, what is this guy? Who is this guy, right? He goes, well, I went to Gorenlian's Face-Off Academy, and this kid, Trevor Baptiste, he's going to Franklin and Marshall, and I really believe that he can be good for us. And so I said, all right, let's get out there. The first call I made was to Todd Cavallero, because he had that. He had that cat eating the bird grin on his face all the time, because he knew what he had, but nobody else knew about this guy. And so Trevor had gone on a couple of Division I visits, and he just felt an affinity to Todd, and he was close to Franklin and Marshall. Franklin and Marshall is a great school. So I called Todd up, and I remember I said, Todd, this is Coach Tierney from Denver. And Todd and I have known each other for years, since he played at Hopkins and everything. And he says, don't tell me. And I go, Todd, I'm really sorry. I just want to let you know that, we've invited Trevor out for a visit. We invited Trevor out for a visit. And he said, I was dreading this phone call happening at some point. And, so we got Trevor out there with his parents, and they are just the greatest people, greatest family going. Trevor's family probably is the only family besides mine that has a son named Trevor and a daughter named Brian. And so we hit it off well, and Dylan did an amazing job with recruiting Trev to get him to come out there. And one thing led to another, and all of a sudden he's there. And so, we didn't even know what we had, to be honest with you. We had this great equipment guy back then, a guy named Rick Mick. And Rick came up to me one day and he said, Coach, I'm worried about Trevor. And I said, what's the matter? He goes, I think he broke up with his girlfriend or something. I said, what are you talking about? He goes, he's got a phone in his pocket for practice, right? We had sweats with pockets. And I said, well, I'll check on him. I'll talk to him, right? So all of a sudden, practice is going on, and all of a sudden I look down the other end of the field, and I see Trevor down there alone, and I keep hearing this sound. It's going beep, beep, And I go, it's driving me crazy. He had gotten a speaker out from one of the guys' rooms, brought it to the field, and he's got that app, that face-off app that every 15 seconds or so beeps so a guy can work on his own. I go over to him, Trev, what are you doing? He goes, Coach, this is how I work on my own. And I go, good. Your girlfriend didn't break up with you? And he goes, I don't even have a girlfriend. So we moved on from there. And then, we got through the fall and we knew he was pretty good. And we had Chase Carrero a couple of years before that. It was a great face-off guy as well. And against Air Force, which was our opening game, he did well. And then the next game was against Duke, and he wins 25 out of 27. And now, I'm no genius, but you win that many against a great team like Duke, you got something. And it just kind of went on from there. And Trevor's his own worst enemy, so you don't have to get on him about anything. He thinks he should win every face-off. Fast forward, only the seventh four-time first-team All-American in the history of our game. And, I got to coach a couple of those guys. Del Dressel at Hopkins was a midi that was that. And, so you just had so many positive things. And Trevor's one problem is he can't say no to anybody. So when he got really good and then the pro thing came, people are calling him, you got to be here, you got to be there. And now suddenly he's become this media darling, and I kind of kid him about that. He calls me every week and we talk, and but he is just the most fantastic, most positive, and obviously talented young man. He played in Matt Brown's, it's our summer box league, the CCBLL, and that's how he was able to start learning box lacrosse. And so he moved pretty seamlessly into the NLL, and he's been one of the faces of that league as an American guy. And he's just such an amazing story. And he has been the face of Denver lacrosse, and now we got another guy that we're hoping can follow him up.
Absolutely. So switching gears here a little bit, I know we're running out of time, but just a couple more questions. I know you're really involved with kind of the changes of the rules and, where it's transformed from back in the 90s to where it is now. What are some of the rule changes that you've really been a huge proponent of? All right. And what are some of the rules that you would like to potentially see change? All right. And as our game continues to evolve?
Well, the first caveat is almost every rule that in the last 6 or 7 years that has come to fruition that have been really good for the game, 15, 20 years ago, I was against. So I want everybody to know that, I'm not that forward thinking a guy. I've had to be convinced on things. The funny thing is the IMLCA is our coaches group. And I've been involved with the rules as their reps to the rules committee for years and years, over 12, 14 years. And I've evolved through input from the other coaches and understanding that if we're going to move our game forward, young people want excitement, young people want fast, young people want scoring. And we're on TV now. TV wants all those things. And so with that in mind, evolved into this whole idea of shot clock, bringing the dive back and all that stuff. And then every time you bring a rule in, it kind of needs tweaking. But certainly, I'm not on the rules committee. I never was, but I've been at their meetings, and those guys do a great job for what's good for the game. And the trouble with lacrosse is you make a rule in the summer, it goes right into effect that fall. And sometimes we've made rules, when Trevor was a senior, my son Trevor was a senior, it was the fall of 2000. We actually had a shot clock in then, a 50-second shot clock in 2000. And they worked on it in the fall. It just couldn't be done. Nobody had enough clocks. Nobody had anything. So they took it back out. It didn't evolve. It didn't come back in until 4 years ago now or so. So I like what's happening in our game. Going back way back before any of these kids who might be watching this were born, we used to have a horn every time the ball went out of bounds, and you could sub every time the ball went out of bounds. And the games would last for 2.5, 3 hours. It was brutal. And then each team, had 4 timeouts, and it was just, so all these things that I liked when I was at Princeton, especially early years. We needed to play like Pete Carroll played basketball. We needed to control the thing. And I remember after we beat, one of the guys I admire most in our game is Coach Roy Simmons. And after we beat them in '92, he was very complimentary of me and our team, and all positive stuff. But he did mention in the post-game press conference, 1992, he said, our game needs a shot clock. Fast forward 2016, when we lose to Maryland I think it was 16 or 17, maybe we lose to Maryland in the semifinals. I'm up there saying we need a shot clock, 25 years later. And so eventually, I think the powers that be knew that we could go there. What would I like to see changed? Or I'd like for them to, stop tinkering with the face-off. It's like every year that's a problem. And the coaches that have good face-off guys want it to stay the same, like I do right now. And the coaches that don't have one want it to change or take it out of the game. It's a historical part of our game. My take is let it keep playing. They'll figure it out. And then, but I think the shot clock has been huge in our game. I'd like to see us get a shorter reset time, because the shot clock is 80 seconds now. That includes a 20-second clearing time. So you hit a pipe to go back to another 80 seconds, to me, doesn't make sense. I'd like to see it to be 45. Maybe the next step is 60. The dive is just, it's impossible to adjudicate. I thought the landing zone was a good, if you're going to keep the dive in, let's have something that at least gives the ref a visual of what happened, even though, was it a push? Was the ball in before he landed? All that stuff is, my take on that is that if there's a penalty flag thrown on a dive, in other words, a defender pushed it, there should be no penalty for that offensive player hitting the goalie, and there should be no penalty, and the ball should count as a goal, whether it went in before, during, or after the hit. I know Jake loves those penalties against defensive guys. I think he still leads a history of penalties. Maybe him and David Morrow are buddies with that, but it's all good stuff. And I think the game is moving into such a great, we get kids now. Some of the things that have happened throughout, is the increase or the improvement in technology, I think, has taken away a little bit from the skill set of our players because the sticks are so good. You can grab a stick and know how to catch within 2 minutes, right? But they all come to us with issues, like having the big bag in their stick or not following through or not snapping on their shots and only being one-handed. And Brownie and I fight about that all the time. But the technology has helped a great deal. These shooters now are just putting the ball in the back of the net. Everybody says, oh, goalies are getting worse. No, they're not. They're facing 100-mile-an-hour shots that hit corners, and these kids really take this seriously. So I think our game is in a good spot. I don't want to see it keep changing, but we continue to need tweaks in the game. Obviously, what we need is what you guys do is great coaching at the younger levels, and that'll help the game continue on.
Absolutely. I just want to say you made a huge impression on me once, and this is a story. You probably don't even remember it, but we were playing in the Final Four. It was in 2006, and you were talking to Jason Miller, Coach Miller, and I always will remember this my entire life. And Coach Miller brought me over to you because I think you were asking who the Terminator was. All right, and that was my nickname back in college. And so I walked over there, and you looked me up and down. You said, "You're the Terminator," all right? And then you grabbed me on my bicep, and you go, "I like your game," all right? And I'll always remember that. And that was something that was really special to me. And I think like getting on these webinars and doing stuff for these kids is just something that these guys will always remember. And so I guess my last question for you would be, hey, you got this kid out there who's in the backyard. hitting the wall. He's doing everything he can to get better. He maybe in Chicago or he's in Indiana. All right, he has aspirations of going to a school like Denver. What's the best advice you could give him? I'll just leaving this conversation. What are the things you could tell him that could stick with him for the rest of his lacrosse career?
Yeah, well, first I'd say, look, about being on these things, I've been blessed beyond what I deserve. And I know that, so that it reminds me always that if I'm somebody that someone want to listen to or be a mentor to, then it's my role to accept that and do that whenever I can. Now, to that young person, it is, I think this whole quarantine thing has really helped us along the lines of what you're saying, because I think, even some of our players, once in a while, they've been playing this game since they're 6 years old. They're now 21 years old. It's kind of like, do you really want me to go out and bang the wall 100 times lefty, 100 times righty? Yes, I do. And by the way, bang it, 100 times behind your back, righty and lefty. And by the way, do some inventive things out there with your stick so that when you come back, you can be even better. The beauty for that kid in Indiana, and we've had kids from Indiana, we've had them, is that you're equal. And what makes you equal is that stick in your hand. You can be in our game, you can be 5'7", 140 pounds. And if you got that magic stick and you can put that ball in the back of the net, or you're quick enough to dodge, the big defenseman, or if you're a kid who somebody says at 8 years old, you can't play football because you weigh too much. Let's get that kid in the goal, or whatever it might be. There's so many ways and shapes and sizes and ways to skin this cat, that if you have that passion, if you're that young guy who really has the passion, I'm not talking about being a lax bro cool guy that wears the purple shorts and the fluorescent green top. I'm talking about the guy who's dedicated, who goes out. We're in the middle of a snowstorm right now, so who goes out in the snow and bangs it against the wall, or shoots so many times that you broke his neighbor's fence and dad's got to fix the fence, or is that guy who demands his little brother to get in the goal so he can shoot, like has happened in a lot of families. If you have that passion and you want to go out and do that thing, there's nothing that can stop you other than your own laziness or lack of love for it, because it's a game where you can get better on your own. And I think this quarantine has really helped, certainly even some of our guys, to realize that. Matt Brown put a little 30-second thing that he's putting out on dodging yesterday in his backyard, and our guys are going to watch this and watch his footwork, and so I more importantly, we mentioned our kids changing later. More importantly, I think for parents, and if there are any parents looking on, it's love the fact that your son loves or daughter loves lacrosse, because it's one of the pure things that's still around in our country and in our athletic environment. And don't yell at the refs, don't yell at the coaches. Just be so proud of him that he's out there playing this great game with young kids, and let them have fun. By the way, this thing is about a lot of fun. And as you grow, as you get older, just keep improving those stick skills. If you're slow, work on your speed. If you're skinny, work on your strength training. But at the end of the day, if you can develop that stick work, you can play anywhere in the country. And by the way, you better study too, because most schools that are good in lacrosse are good academic institutions. And I've seen too many guys either get into one of them and then fail out, or not be able to get to their dream school because they didn't do well at school.
Absolutely. Well, Coach, this was awesome. I can't thank you enough for getting on. just the wealth of knowledge you're able to bring to families out here in the Midwest and other non-traditional lacrosse hotbeds. I mean, it's huge. I mean, I look up to you. I know Mike does, and we're really grateful for having the opportunity to have you on here. So,
yeah, Coach, we've gotten the opportunity to talk to a bunch of different coaches, and I think you named about 50 former players that, like, obviously you're passionate about, like, inspired you, coaches that inspired you. I've seen you coach games, and you're you're a very competitive person. But it's really cool to hear you talk about all these players that got you to where you are, and we've got a lot of future Denver fans, but also Bill Tierney fans that are listening in. So thanks again for doing this.
I appreciate it, guys, and I mean it when I say it's an honor to do this stuff. It really is. It's it's just this game has given me my whole life, my family's life, my whole life, and so anyway, if I could do it in the future or any way I can give back, I try to do that. So thank you for the opportunity.
all right, thanks again, Coach. We really appreciate it.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.